welcome to Trust Your Glitter podcast. This is Kristy, and welcome to Astrology for the week of January the 8th through the 14th. We are in the second week of the new year, and I don't know about you guys, but with the transits of last week, it was about slowing down, and it was about being introverted. So I hope that some people were able to get their rest on and to be able to take care of yourself, even with the pressures of entering a new year, new you type of vibe that's out there. There's also a lot about self-care in the first few months of 2024. So also really honor that as we go through the weeks, with all the pressures of, all of the gyms and self-help gurus that are out there, even with me. Like, you don't have to listen to me with this podcast and say, oh, Kristy, you're crazy, I want to go and do this, this, and this. It's like, if you're feeling the vibe, do the vibe. But I do want to say that there is sort of this introverted feeling during this time of the year in general, and at this time we're also feeling the pull inward. So I want to acknowledge that as we look at this week. We don't have a lot of transits in this week, but we do have some very interesting affairs in the sky. The transits we have are pretty big. So, for example, I'll get more into the chart itself, but on January the 11th, we have a new moon in the cardinal sign of Capricorn that is at 20 degrees, and that takes place at 6:57 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this is going to be a really important new moon for us all. So I will get into the chart of the new moon, but also plan for the next day, the 12th. Juno, the asteroid of partnerships, is going retrograde. That does affect our partnerships. Now, because Juno is not a major planet, it's not going to affect us on a level of, partnerships are going to shift and change. The way I like to look at asteroids is see where the asteroid is transiting in your personal chart, how Juno makes aspects in your chart, because sometimes you look at a chart of a couple, for example, and they have Juno connections, often seen with long-term couples, married couples. So this could be also finalizations related to that Venus retrograde that we had in the summer of 2023, taking us out through the fall of 2023. So it's kind of revisiting a lot of those memories. It's memory lane type stuff. And then on January 13th, we have Mercury, the planet of our mind, our voice, communication, re-entering the sign of Capricorn. As we remember, Mercury was retrograde between the signs of Sagittarius and Capricorn, and now Mercury direct is re-entering Capricorn, taking us into the introverted level of our minds. So we could be really, really just in our own world, but it also is very serious. Capricorn is a very serious planet, a very serious Saturn is a very serious planet. The ruler of Capricorn, very serious sign. So conversations could take on a more serious tone. So as we look at this week, this new moon in Capricorn at 6:57 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is very powerful. It's a very powerful force in the sky, and new moons are about setting goals, setting intentions for manifestation. So for us, we're looking at a new moon that wants us to grow slowly. And it's going to be helpful when Mercury re-enters Capricorn this week, because it brings us a more mature perspective of what in the actual fuck that Mercury retrograde was taking us through. So a lot of this stuff is going to be looking at life from a more from a growth-oriented, capitalistic, long-term perspective, even as the new moon is taking place. So this new moon is saying, hey, yes, we have our aspirations, but we have to also look at a very practical side to this, and we also have timing involved in this as well. So as we look at this particular new moon is very special because it is directly square the north and south node. The north node in the sign of Aries, the south node and directly opposite in the sign of Libra. So with the new moon at 20 degrees 44 and the north node at 2013, this square is very, very powerful. And when I see a cardinal square, it's not easy, but it's also those things in our life where we're meant to sit in our power and our strength and say, hey, I've come a really long way from where I was even a decade ago. You know, for those working on Saturn cycles 28 years ago, this is Chronos timing. This is saying, you know, yes, the clock is ticking in this world, and we're here for a bigger purpose. Capricorn is not afraid to put in those long hours, you know, those nights of work, the research that it takes. You know, if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, like the sacrifices that it takes to build your business, especially because Capricorn is the sign of the business owner. Capricorn is the sign of, you know, the hard worker. Capricorn is an earth sign. And when I look at the angles of the chart of this particular new moon, the ascendant is also in Capricorn, and the part of fortune is conjunct the ascendant. So we are meant to get a lot of Capricorn lessons at once. Pluto is still in the sign of Capricorn right at the end at 29 degrees, the anaretic degree. 29 is that last most potent degree of any sign. And this is kind of a precursor to where, you know, we're getting ready for Pluto to re-enter the sign of Aquarius. But this full moon is also like, you know, this is where you advertise your business. You might not get your business recognized right now, but this is putting those steps out there. I wouldn't, you know, it's interesting with this first house aspect squaring the nodes, because it could also be, for example, my podcast, very Capricornian. I'm very Capricorn Aries. You know, I know that life is about the long game. I know that it's about, you know, delayed gratification. It is about, you know, the years that you look back and you remember, you know, you gave up a whole living space so that you could reduce your costs, so that you could build your business, so that you could keep your dream going. But you're eating, you know, cans of beans for 5 years. This is Capricorn stuff. And this is exactly what this new moon was saying. You know, from here until March, you might be eating cans of beans, but the thing is, it's okay. And that's the other part of this beautiful new moon, is that, you know, you have your vision. Keep going for your vision. You know, that's the beauty of the fact that even with this new moon, Mercury's still in Sagittarius, still holding that vision. Mars is in Capricorn. We have Venus in the sign of Sagittarius. And I'm loving, you know, the energy of this cardinal new moon. I'm loving the energy of taking direction, taking leadership, taking orientation, and allowing yourself to really lean in to the grit that it takes to keep building and building towards your dreams. So overall, this is a beautiful new moon. We have a nice sextile between Saturn and Jupiter here, which is like, when I say sextile, it's a friendship connection. So the sextile between Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter in Taurus. Very lovely, very helpful, very much saying, the spiritual elements are here. Have faith and allow things to really unfold that you never really quite realized you had. There's also a sextile between Mars and Saturn as well. So your work ethic align with, again, your dreams. I love this. This is beautiful. This is harmony. This is, I believe I had a soul songs episode. This is singing from your soul. This is hearing the inner calling and saying to yourself, I've got this. There's still an influence of Mercury square to Neptune earlier in the week. So it could feel like there is a block. You're like, I can't see around the corner to my dreams. But Mars has got your back, Saturn's got your back, Jupiter's got your back here. So I like it. It's like we have, the resistance training going on in the chart. We also have, the miraculous elements of the sextiles and trines, the beautiful trine between Mars and Jupiter as well. Mars being at 5 degrees of Capricorn, Jupiter at 5 degrees Taurus. So that is a beautiful, beautiful aspect right there. And my word of the year is faith. So I think I'm going to approach every episode, through 2024 with the idea of where is faith taking us and where is it, allowing us to really trust that sometimes we're going to the ship blind. Sometimes we have no idea what the fuck we're doing. But if we have faith in ourselves, if we have faith in the fact that this shit does cost a lot, sometimes it costs, a dream. And with Capricorn, like, this is just me talking, looking at this chart and saying, when you go for a dream, sometimes you're not going to bring the whole camp with you. Sometimes people are left behind. Sometimes there are people that just don't understand it. There are sometimes, you trust your purpose, you trust your passions, but there are people who are not going to get it. Especially, I'm coming at this from the angle of being a woman in stand-up comedy. Not everybody's going to understand what you're talking about. Not everybody's going to be on board. And I also want to highlight the fact that later on in this episode, I will be highlighting Katt Williams' chart, because I don't know, for those who are non-comics, Katt Williams dropped some very, very big, I don't want to say bombs because that's the wrong thing to say for comedy, but he dropped a lot of knowledge this past week, not just for comedians, but for people in the entertainment industry, and just for anybody who doesn't really know what that journey is like. He really brought a lot of truth to power. So I am going to talk about Katt Williams' natal chart later on in the episode as well. Another part of this new moon is that she's in a very beautiful trine to Uranus and Taurus. So the trine is only about a degree apart. Uranus is at 19 degrees of Taurus, and that's Sun Moon 20. So I love this. I love this trine. It is about appreciating, the chaos, appreciating the fact that you can't control what's going on in the world, because Capricorn wants to be controlled, but so does Taurus. I think Tauruses are getting that big, big, big spiritual lesson over the last few years where it's just like, okay, I gotta put my hands up and surrender. But in this particular new moon, you've got to put the faith in the fact that your seeds are being planted in this winter season, and the fact that it is okay to allow yourself to grow. It is okay to allow yourself to take time. It is okay to say, I don't know what I'm doing right now, but where your power is in taking the time to learn something new, taking the time to get as many of those books read, to get as many of those podcasts that inspired you in your queue, to take the time to figure it out day by day, piece by piece, because this is a long-form, long-term moon, and we're going to see the effects of this new moon later on. So The winter solstice episode, I talk about how there's quarterly gains. This is looking at life in 4 quarters. But I also want to say with this new moon in Capricorn, we also have to look at this life or this timing as appreciating the quarterly cycles. So we're going to see fruition during Aries season, probably mid-Aries season. We're going to see fruition or at least a shakeup in society in April. And then we're going to also see this new moon bring us to a story as well during Cancer season. This new moon we're going to see as well bring us more goals, more aspects during Libra season. And then we'll revisit it again in Capricorn season. We're going to release from this. So we see the growth cycle. And I'm looking at this as every step of the way, there is something to learn. Every step of the way as we go through 2024, we're being brought these gifts of leveling up, appreciating the knowledge, appreciating our power. Especially when we see the vacillation between Pluto in Capricorn and Pluto in Aquarius during the timing of 2024. So we're gonna be heading into Pluto in Aquarius very, very soon. But we're also gonna see Pluto re-enter Capricorn as well, and then we're gonna see that shift back and forth. So because of that, there's still more transformation to go through, evolution, personal cycles, rising from our own bullshit, and it's totally okay. There's a trine here with Uranus for a reason. There is a shake and bake, and it's okay. So I just want to say that this is how I'm going to approach the aspects of the week. I'm just looking at the new moon chart herself, and please stay tuned for part 2, where I go through Katt Williams' natal chart. I also take a peek at his progressions because there are many gems in his progress chart as well. And thank you for listening to Trust Your Glitter with Kristy Belich. Take care. Hello! Welcome to Trust Your Glitter. This is a special edition. I would say a celebrity spotlight for the great Katt Williams. I wanted to do this little spotlight because you have to live under a rock to not have seen the Katt Williams interview this week. Holy fuck balls. He's saying it all out loud. He put it all on the table, and let me just tell you, he has basically one last fuck left to give. And I just want to honor that. As an Aries, I definitely have to say, when I saw the interview, I was just like applauding him, and I was like, it's time. We got to look at some celebrity charts on this podcast a little more often. And so I wanted to take a peek both at his natal chart, and I also wanted to take a peek at his progress chart. Because when I looked over at Katt Williams' natal chart, he doesn't have a lot of planets aspecting his natal chart in a way that I felt the interview was triggering anything big. But when I looked at Katt Williams' progress chart, I was like, oh my God, this is what's going on. And it is textbook astrology, y'all. It is textbook and it's also the beauty of astrology. We've got to look at the fact that life is all about timing. Life is all about appreciating the timing. And it's so interesting that this week's episode is all about this upcoming Capricorn New Moon. And Katt Williams is very much incorporated into this new moon. So I want to get into that. But first I want to just talk about his natal big 3. And when I look at Katt Williams' chart, so his chart is public data. It is September 2nd, 1971, 5:28 a.m. He was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. And for those who are listening, if you're not a comedy fan, you've got to know who Katt Williams is. He's the GOAT of comedy. He's been doing comedy for decades and decades. He's Katt Williams. Like, there's nothing, mic drop, you know what I'm saying? But the thing is, on his interview with Shay, he got into it about the cliques of the comedy industry. He talked about a lot of the underbelly of what happens in Hollywood, a lot of the Neptunian wool that gets pulled over everybody's eyes, and he really brought up a lot of political, well, more inner political issues, the interpolitics that go on in stand-up comedy. So I just want to say hats off to Katt Williams, because he really did shift the conversation, which is his job. That's what he does. And that's what a comedian's job is. Basically, Katt Williams was doing what comedians are supposed to be doing. He doesn't toe the line. He's not on some Instagram showing booty shots. He's literally being a comedian, showing us all what the world is supposed to hear, the truth. And that's what he did. So when I looked at his big three, he is a Virgo sun. He is a moon in Aquarius, and his rising, a sign, is in Leo. And when I look at his chart, I want to look at what in the hell was going on when that interview was released, what was being triggered or aspected. There's not a lot, meaning like, yes, we just went through like a lunar transit through Virgo, but the moon moves pretty quickly. And if I'm looking at moon cycles, I want to look at things like full moons, new moons, eclipses to see what's getting triggered. So that's one thing I would be looking for when I'm looking at his chart angles. He does have Jupiter approaching his midheaven, which is kind of the highest point in his chart. But that's going to happen, and it's kind of been vacillating over his midheaven. So that's something that happened this past summer of 2023. He's going to revisit it again. He is going to have the upcoming Jupiter conjunction with Uranus, but that will be in his 10th house of career and public access. So this story with Katt Williams isn't over. Whatever he said has a bigger meaning to it in a way that it's going to continue and perpetuate probably through March and April and into the summer of 2024. So for the comedy world, for the world of more of entertainment, and just kind of looking at the political assessment of Hollywood and what he's talking about, this is something that's a bigger, wider issue. He's also going to be having Jupiter go over his Saturn in his 10th house of career. So this is going to basically, anytime Jupiter goes over anything in our chart, Jupiter expands things. So it widens his energy in relations to literally being, a king of comedy. Where Saturn sits in our chart is where we hold that strong, directive authority and male authority in our chart. So Saturn in the 10th house, when Jupiter goes over that, that's going to be a big story for him. So his 10th house is getting a lot of transits ahead, but that's not right now. So when I'm looking at his sun, he also has Venus very, very close to his sun. He's a Sun-Venus conjunction. His sun's at 9 degrees of Virgo. His Venus is at 10 degrees of Virgo. So that is a conjunction between these two planets. It really just is an entertainer's, it's like an entertainer's dream to have, because it basically means you are here to be seen, you are here to be heard, you're here to live the world of entertainment. The other part that I'm looking at is his moon. Now, his moon is something I really want to highlight. His moon's in his 6th house. His moon is at 1 degree Aquarius. So it's very interesting, because when Pluto entered the sign of Aquarius on March 23rd of 2023, he was going through the first portion of his Pluto of a Pluto moon transit. So whenever you have an outer planet like Pluto start to conjunct, meaning directly align with an inner planet, and our moon is one of the most it is the most inner planet we can have. It's one of the most sensitive planets, and in astrology we refer to the moon as a planet. I know the moon is a body and a satellite, but in astrology, in our charts, we refer to the moon as a planet. So in this case, we have the moon Pluto conjunction by transit. But the Pluto is still in Capricorn at 29 degrees. And Pluto will not be back in Aquarius until the 20th of January. So for Katt Williams personally, he's vacillating between 2023 and 2024 with a direct Pluto moon transit. So he's kind of in this there. If I'm going to look at his natal chart and be like, the biggest thing that I see going on for his natal chart, in my humble opinion, is the fact that Pluto is vacillating over his moon, not quite steady over his moon, won't fully be steady over his moon until November 19th, I believe, of 2024. So he's going back and forth with the Pluto transit. Literally, it's his last fuck to give. Pluto doesn't care. Pluto transforms whatever, and he's been through the trenches. And in my opinion, I think Pluto in the sign of Aquarius is far more freeing than, say, this long, tedious Pluto through Capricorn transit, which has been since 2008. So I think for him, this is like setting him free. I think in a lot of ways. And the other thing is he has his North Node in Aquarius. So he is, it's at 12 degrees though. So it's kind of down the road. But he also has his Mars, or wait, let's take a peek before I say it. It's at 13 degrees of Aquarius. And his Mars is actually retrograde natally at 12 degrees Aquarius. So he has a conjunction with Mars and his North Node in his 6th house as well as his moon. And I think if I were looking at anything in his chart, it's lit up there. He did go through like the Venus retrograde, going back and forth in his 1st house into his 12th house. But the thing that I really want to highlight is the Aquarius energy that he holds. So yes, he has beautiful Virgo, Sun, Venus. But when I do look at like what's getting transformed in his natal chart, it's definitely this lunar energy for him. And I love his moon. His moon is trine to Uranus in Libra. Let's see what degree that is. His Uranus is at 11 degrees. I'm looking at a different version of my chart. It doesn't have the degrees on there. It's picking up a wide trine. I'm not going to count that, but I will count the Uranus trine to his North Node Mars. So I'm not going to count that his moon is trine Uranus. By sign it is, but if I want to go classical astrology, the trine is actually that beautiful North Node conjunct Mars. And when you have a North Node in your chart, it's influencing. We all have North Nodes, but when you have a planet conjunct the North Node in your chart, it's basically saying like this is the work. So it's interesting when you hear the interview, because this is the work that he's meant to do. He's meant to do community. Like, this is community service. Like, with Aquarius, this is how you are looking at the collective. How you are helping, bring wisdom to the wider range of, the generations behind you. And that's what he's doing. So I want to also acknowledge, because I was looking like what else went over his anything in his chart that directly was around this interview with Shay. And one of the things I will also bring up is, and this is generational, but his Neptune is at 0 degrees of Sagittarius. And as we entered the new year, so the last few weeks of 2023 into the first week of 2024, we did experience, Mars was in the square with Saturn and Pisces, Mars, Sagittarius. We've experienced Mercury over that point as well. So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at his Neptune at 0 degrees Sag. He had Mercury over this in a square with Saturn. He's, natally, he's being squared by Saturn and Pisces with his Neptune. But again, this is a generational thing. So what I really want to see is what's the crux of this? What's the inner planets? And also Venus as well just went over this. So we entered the new year and Venus was over his Neptune. So the other thing is, when I look at the chart, we just had Venus by transit go over Neptune and square Saturn. So it's something that it's not really an inner planet, but it is going through his 7th house. The other piece of this is it is affecting his 4th house, which is a personal house as well, also ruled by the moon. One of the other things, when I was looking at the charts in general, is that I wanted to kind of look at, are there any angles? Often with things like this, you want to look at angles, you want to look at midpoints, you want to look at things that are really, really personally affecting somebody's life as well. So one of the other things that I'm looking at is his chart progressions. And sometimes when, say I'm in a reading and I'm looking at a lot of natal charts or any astrology charts, you also want to look at the progressions because it brings in some of the personal planets that are also, I don't know, it's almost like we have these moments in our life where we mature and our progress chart matures just like we mature. So in this case, his big 3 when it comes to his progress chart are, he has a Scorpio sun by progression. He also has a moon in Libra by progression, and his progressed ascendant is actually conjunct his progressed moon and also his progressed Uranus and Lilith. So he has what I would consider a stellium in Libra. So this is the moon on the 12th house side, the moon being 14 degrees, conjunct Uranus at 16 degrees, and the ascendant at 16 degrees. So one of the things that I'm really, really, really intrigued by is the fact that his north node is at 20 degrees of Aries. And the thing, not his north node, wait, hold up. So one of the things that I'm very intrigued by is his progressed descendant, his progressed ascendant descendant is also being aspected by the north and south node. In this case, the north node at 20 degrees Aries kind of sits in the 7th house of his progressed chart. So what it is doing, and what I find very fascinating, is this is being directly affected by the upcoming new moon in Capricorn. He also has his progressed midheaven and nadir, midheaven being 19 degrees of Cancer and nadir being 19 degrees of Capricorn. So this whole construct, if we look at it, is like, if you think of a direct 90 degree, like if we're, it's a perfect perfect square in many ways. And in astrology, now, because it's the angles, we're not going to call it a cardinal square, but for the purpose of what's going on in his life, based on the squares with the nodes, and based on the moon and Uranus and his progressed ascendant, so this is by progression, in Libra, he is being aspected on the 11th of January by this beautiful new moon in Capricorn. And what that's doing is it's bringing new life to all things that are comprised of capitalism. So when we're looking at this chart, we're actually looking at somebody who is forward thinking in the realm of the economy. And I find it very fascinating that here's somebody who really stuck it out and did what, say, like, I would even argue that here's somebody who is taking his knowledge. This is somebody who's taking his power and he's using it for good. You know, if we look at, say, for example, the founding fathers and what they did and how they didn't really incorporate every aspect into things with the United States going through the Pluto return this is actually a reframing, a transformative viewpoint on exactly what's going on right now in real time with these astrological transits. So the other piece of this is that when I look at his progress chart and I compare it to his natal chart, I'm also looking at the fact that his moon by natal is in his progress 4th house. So the thing that really matters to me is when I see something like this is where he's fostered and held on a spiritual level. So I'm looking at this from like the divine mother perspective, or I'm looking at this from the fact that he is really divinely protected, and he is meant to do this. He is meant to speak up on these subjects. The other piece of this is by progression, his sun is conjunct what's called the part of fortune in his 2nd house. Now, the 2nd house can be kind of a controversial subject because it is about property. It is about what we have to have is the motto for the 2nd house, often associated with the sign of Taurus. But with the scorpionic influence here with the part of fortune, he's meant to look at this from the evolved standpoint. So in this perspective, we're looking at this from the fact that this is the phoenix who did rise from the ashes. And we also want to look at other aspects as well. And I think it's interesting that in his progress chart, he also has a couple of stelliums. So we have the stellium with the moon, Uranus, ascendant, and Lilith in Libra. But he also has an inner planet stellium. I'm not going to count Jupiter as an inner planet, but I'll say he has Mercury, Jupiter, Venus in his progressed 2nd house. Mercury being at 11 degrees Sagittarius, Jupiter also and it's an exact conjunction, 1144 degrees. So Mercury, Jupiter, Venus in a stellium in Sagittarius. So that's what I really want to see data-wise, because that's where all of these progressions, retrogrades, transits have happened with Sagittarius over the last few weeks. It was like it was something that was waiting to drop, and he was meant to say it. And who's going to say it but somebody with Sagittarian influence in their life? Because, you know, he is a Virgo by natal chart, but there is nothing more than a Sagittarian energy disdains more than injustice. So that is something I really also want to bring up in his progress chart. Another piece of his progress chart that I would like to bring up is his progress Mars. Now, when we look at his natal chart has Mars to the north node. So it's important to see where Mars is by progression, because that's where the lesson goes. It's almost like as you graduate, as Mars graduates, Mars brings that north node forward. So even with the progressed north node in the 4th house still in Aquarius, the progressed Mars energy, and remember he has Mars retrograde natally, the progressed Mars energy is at 4 degrees of Pisces. And the thing about that is by transit, Saturn is right over that progressed Mars. So this is knowledge. This is like you look at the father, the true father energy. This is somebody holding that energy. And in Pisces, this is the compassionate father. And if I look at the tarot, that is the King of Cups, or that is, you know, in many ways the Ace of Cups, or the Heart's energy. So it's really, he's putting his heart on the line for everybody. And I really love that. And by progression, it's in an almost exact square with Saturn in his progress chart in Gemini. So he is looking at this from the dual nature, but he he is, he's Katt Williams. He's meant to shake up the world. He's meant to tell us what's going on. And I really think, I wanted to honor him this week on the podcast by spotlighting, the Shay interview because it's brilliant. And for all the comedians out there, I just want to say thank you for listening. So I just want to say thank you guys for liking, rating, subscribing. If you can, head to Apple, Spotify, iTunes, anywhere that there are podcasts. I see some people coming in from I think it's Audacity, which I had never heard of before. But I just want to say thank you guys so much because this little podcast that could is going up in Chartable, and she's up there with some big ones. So when I get on the US charts, it means a lot. So I do want to say thank you guys so much. And if you can still head on over to Spotify or iTunes, rate and review. It really helps me in the numbers. And I just want to say thank you. Have an amazing week ahead. Take care.